Three data scientists, two analysts, and a business manager walk into a data escape room. Each holds different pieces of the same puzzle, but the doors between them are locked. Sound like your organization? This isn't the setup for a bad joke. It's the reality of data management in most companies today. In this episode, I'll show you how federated data governance acts as the master key to unlock those doors. We'll visualize the entire process using our data silo escape room analogy, breaking down how data stewards, governance councils, and data contracts work together to create a system where data flows to where it creates the most value. Welcome to the data silo escape room. Imagine for a moment that your organization's data management system is an actual physical escape room. You and your colleagues are trapped inside, but instead of working together to solve puzzles, you're all separated in different chambers, each holding crucial pieces of information that the others desperately need. This isn't just a creative visualization, it's an uncomfortably accurate representation of how most organizations manage their data today. Let's step inside this data silo escape room together and see what's really happening. The room has multiple chambers, each representing a different department in your organization. Marketing has their customer engagement data locked in one chamber. Finance has their revenue figures secured in another. Product development has usage metrics in a third, while operations maintains performance data in yet another chamber. Between each of these rooms are solid, locked doors. No windows, no gaps, just impenetrable barriers preventing information from flowing freely. In the marketing chamber, we find Sarah, a data analyst who needs operational data to understand why customer satisfaction scores are dropping in certain regions. She has all the customer feedback surveys, but lacks the delivery performance metrics that might explain the pattern. In the operations chamber, Miguel, a senior operations manager, has those exact delivery metrics Sarah needs. He's also trying to optimize routing, but he's missing the customer location density data that marketing possesses. Over in the finance chamber, Priya, the financial controller, is attempting to forecast next quarter's revenue, but can't access the product usage trends that would make her predictions more accurate. She has historical financial data, but needs signals about how customers are actually using the product. And in the product development chamber, Alex, a data scientist, has built a sophisticated churn prediction model, but can't test it properly without customer service interaction data. His algorithms are ready, but without real-world data to train them, they remain theoretical exercises. Each professional in each chamber has expertise and information that would be incredibly valuable to the others. Yet they remain isolated, making decisions based on incomplete information and developing strategies with partial visibility. The real-world cost of this arrangement is staggering. Projects that should take weeks drag on for months. The marketing team commissions research that operations already conducted last quarter. The product team builds features no one asked for because they couldn't access customer feedback. Finance makes cautious forecasts that underestimate growth potential because they lack visibility into emerging usage patterns. According to recent research, organizations lose approximately 20 to 30% of their revenue annually due to poor data quality and inaccessibility. A typical Fortune 1000 company stands to gain over $65 million in additional net income with just a 10% improvement in data accessibility. In our escape room, we can see the professionals attempting to overcome these barriers using familiar, inadequate methods. Sarah exports her customer feedback data to a spreadsheet and emails it to Miguel. But by the time he receives it, the data is already outdated. Miguel tries to shout information about delivery performance through the wall, but the details get lost in the transmission. Just like when critical data points get summarized in executive presentations, losing their granularity and context. Priya schedules weekly meetings with Alex to share financial insights, but these scheduled information exchanges only happen periodically, not when the information is actually needed. Alex writes detailed documentation about his models and slides it under the door to marketing, but without the ability to demonstrate and explain, much of the nuance is lost. Similar to how data dictionaries and catalogs often fail to capture the full context of complex data sets. These workarounds, emails, file shares, periodic reports, screenshots, and manual exports are the digital equivalent of passing notes under doors or shouting through walls. They're inefficient, error-prone, and fundamentally inadequate for the speed and complexity of modern business decisions. What makes this scenario particularly frustrating is that all the data needed for breakthrough insights and transformative decisions actually exists within the organization. It's not missing, it's just inaccessible at the moment it would create the most value. The organization has all the ingredients for success, but keeps them separated in different pantries. This isn't just a clever metaphor or thought experiment. This is the daily reality for most organizations operating with traditional data management approaches. According to IDC, 73% of organizational data goes completely unused for analytics. Not because organizations don't want to use it, but because the practical barriers to accessing, understanding, and utilizing that data are too high. The consequences extend beyond mere inefficiency. Companies make critical strategic decisions based on incomplete information. They miss market opportunities because insights arrive too late. They frustrate customers with disconnected experiences because customer data is fragmented across systems. They waste millions on redundant technology because no one has visibility across the entire information landscape. In one documented case, a global consumer products company discovered they had 80 different databases containing customer information, with no way to form a complete picture of their customer relationships. Another enterprise found they were spending over $300 million annually just on maintaining redundant and disconnected data systems. Throughout this video, we'll use this escape room visualization to understand the true nature of data silos and explore how federated data governance provides the keys to unlock these doors. We'll see how companies can transform their data landscape from isolated chambers into connected spaces where information flows to the people who need it when they need it without compromising security or control. We're not talking about tearing down all the walls. Some separation between domains is necessary and valuable. Marketing, finance, operations, and product teams have different specialized needs for their data. But the lack of secure, efficient pathways between these spaces creates the organizational equivalent of being trapped in separate rooms, each holding pieces of a puzzle that can only be solved together. Think of federated data governance not as demolishing the escape room, but as installing the right doors, pathways, and communication systems that allow information to flow while maintaining necessary boundaries. It's about creating a connected ecosystem rather than a chaotic open space. But before we can understand how to escape, we need to understand how we got trapped in the first place. How did organizations end up building these data silos that now limit their agility and effectiveness? Why does almost every enterprise find itself in this predicament? How we got locked in? The evolution of data silos. Those impenetrable walls separating your organization's data weren't constructed as barriers, they were actually built as solutions. The uncomfortable truth is that your most talented forward-thinking teams are likely responsible for creating the very data maze you're now struggling to navigate. The history of how we trapped ourselves in data silos begins in the mainframe era of the 1960s and 70s. Back then, computing was centralized by necessity. Massive room-sized computers housed all corporate data in one physical location. Organizations had a single source of truth, albeit a limited one. Everyone accessed the same data through the same channels, creating natural alignment. But as computing evolved through the 1980s, something fundamental changed. The personal computer revolution democratized technology, pushing computational power to individual desktops. This technological shift coincided with management philosophies emphasizing specialized business units and decentralized decision-making. Suddenly, each department could create its own technological solutions. Marketing teams invested in customer relationship management systems to track prospects and campaigns. Finance departments built elaborate accounting databases optimized for compliance and reporting. Human resources implemented personnel systems tailored to their specific needs. Operations teams created inventory and supply chain management tools designed for efficiency. Each of these specialized systems made perfect sense in isolation. Marketing needed flexible structures to capture evolving customer preferences. Finance required rigid frameworks with clear audit trails. HR needed secure systems that protected sensitive employee information. These weren't mistakes, they were rational responses to departmental needs. The 1990s accelerated this trend. With the rise of enterprise resource planning, ERP systems, organizations invested millions in these comprehensive platforms, hoping to unify operations. Yet implementation challenges led to compromises. Custom modules, specialized add-ons, and shadow systems proliferated. Rather than solving fragmentation, ERPs often simply added another layer to the growing data ecosystem. The early 2000s brought another wave of change with customer-centric business models. Companies rushed to understand their customers holistically, but found their valuable data trapped in disconnected systems. A retail bank discovered they had 15 different definitions of active customer across 7 systems. A telecommunications provider realized that customer complaint data lived in 9 separate databases, making it impossible to identify systemic problems. And then came the cloud computing revolution, which paradoxically made the problem both better and worse. The cloud promised integration but delivered unprecedented ease of adoption. Individual departments could now subscribe to specialized software as a service solutions without IT approval. The marketing team adopted Salesforce, while HR implemented Workday, and operations chose specialized industry tools, each creating their own new data repositories in different clouds. By 2010, the typical large enterprise was managing hundreds of separate data stores. Research by MIT showed that an average Fortune 500 company used over 900 different software applications, most containing valuable but isolated data. A manufacturing company discovered they had 23 different systems containing partial product information, making it impossible to get a complete view of their offerings. What's remarkable is that each step in this fragmentation journey was driven by positive intentions. The departments weren't trying to hide data. They were trying to solve specific business problems with the best tools available. Data silos weren't created through malice or incompetence, but through logical decisions that prioritized immediate departmental needs over long-term enterprise connectivity. Organizations eventually recognized this growing fragmentation and attempted to solve it through centralized data governance. These initiatives typically created enterprise data warehouses, massive repositories designed to consolidate information from disparate sources. IT departments were tasked with extracting, transforming, and loading data from operational systems into these centralized structures. But these centralization efforts frequently faltered for several predictable reasons. First, they required significant time and resources. One global retailer spent 4 years and over 30 million building a centralized customer data platform that was outdated before it launched. Second, centralized models created bottlenecks. All data requests had to flow through overwhelmed IT teams. Third, and perhaps most importantly, they separated data from domain expertise. Consider what happens when financial data gets extracted from finance systems and loaded into a central warehouse. The context, business rules, and specialized knowledge of the finance team no longer accompany that data. Analysts from other departments can access the numbers, but lack the understanding to interpret them correctly. It's like taking a book written in French, translating individual words to English, and expecting readers to understand the nuances of the original text. This centralized approach also couldn't keep pace with business change. By the time IT teams finished mapping one set of systems, the business had already adopted new tools and created new data sources. A healthcare organization spent 18 months standardizing patient data only to find that 3 new patient interaction systems had been implemented during their project. The most damaging consequence of this failed centralization was time to insight. When a business question crosses departmental boundaries, as the most valuable questions inevitably do, the answer gets trapped in a procedural maze. A financial services company found that cross-functional data requests took an average of 32 days to fulfill, by which time the business opportunity had often passed. This brings us to our current predicament. Most organizations have tried both decentralized and centralized approaches, ending up with the worst of both worlds, fragmented systems with rigid governance processes overlaid on top. The result is that the majority of organizations can access only a fraction of their data's potential value. What makes this situation particularly frustrating is that organizations keep investing in new solutions that don't address the fundamental problem. According to Gartner, enterprise data integration spending has grown by 12% annually for the past decade, yet the percentage of accessible, usable data has barely increased. The reality we must accept is that data silos aren't simply technical problems, they're organizational ones. They emerge naturally from the way businesses evolve and specialize. Marketing needs different data structures than finance because they do fundamentally different work. Trying to force all departments to use identical data models is like asking poets and accountants to use the same vocabulary. It serves neither well. What's more, some degree of specialization is actually beneficial. Finance departments should be experts in financial data. Marketing should deeply understand customer information. Operations should have specialized knowledge of supply chain data. This domain expertise is valuable and shouldn't be discarded in pursuit of standardization. The failed escape attempts. Why traditional approaches don't work. While specialization creates valuable domain expertise, it also explains why the most common data integration approaches feel like elaborate escape tunnels that collapse before reaching daylight. Organizations have attempted increasingly expensive and complex solutions to their data silo problems, but what if the fundamental assumption behind these approaches is fatally flawed? Let's return to our data silo escape room to understand the traditional escape strategies organizations have attempted. Imagine our trapped departments, each in their separate chambers, trying different tactics to share information. The most common approach has been to build massive centralized repositories, essentially trying to move all the furniture from each room into one central chamber. The first major escape attempt typically involves enterprise data warehouses. These are massive projects that attempt to extract data from all operational systems, transform it into a standardized format, and load it into a central repository. In our escape room metaphor, this is like hiring a team of engineers to build an elaborate tunnel system connecting all rooms to a new central chamber. The warehouse approach seemed logical. Create a single source of truth where all data lives in a structured, governed form. Companies have invested billions in these initiatives over decades, but these projects often stretch for years, with teams laboriously mapping source systems, designing transformation rules, and building ETL pipelines to move the data. By the time these warehouses are finally constructed, the business has typically moved on. The requirements that drove the initial design have changed, new data sources have emerged, and the warehouse becomes outdated before it's even completed. It's like finishing your escape tunnel only to discover the room you're escaping to is no longer the one you need to reach. Next came data lakes, the more flexible cousin of data warehouses. Rather than transforming data before storage, data lakes promised to store everything in its raw form. The idea was appealing. Dump all your data in one place, then figure out how to use it later. This is like our escape room occupants deciding to break down all the walls simultaneously and create one massive open space. But data lakes quickly became data swamps. Without proper metadata, governance structures, and clear ownership, these repositories turned into unnavigable messes. Analysts couldn't find what they needed, data quality varied wildly, and the promised agility evaporated under the weight of uncatalogued information. Our escape room analogy becomes apt here. Removing all walls without a structural plan doesn't create freedom. It risks having the entire ceiling collapse. Enterprise service buses and middleware solutions represent another escape attempt. These technologies aim to leave data in place but create standardized pipes between systems. In our escape room, this would be like building a complex series of tubes between chambers to send information back and forth without actually opening the doors. While these approaches maintain some domain integrity, they often become bottlenecks themselves. Each new connection requires specialized integration work, central teams become overwhelmed with requests, and the system grows increasingly brittle as connections multiply. Our tube-building escape room residents find themselves waiting months for each new connection, struggling to maintain existing ones, and watching helplessly as the entire system becomes too complex to manage. The fundamental flaw in all these approaches is that they're built on a false premise, that data fragmentation is primarily a technical problem requiring a technical solution. But this misdiagnoses the actual issue. The real problem isn't technical, it's organizational and cultural. Consider what happens during these integration projects. The finance team must translate their specialized accounting terminology for the central data team. Marketing must explain the nuances of campaign attribution. Engineers must describe complex product specifications. In each case, domain knowledge gets diluted as it moves away from its source. The centralization paradox emerges. To make data accessible across the organization, you must first extract it from the very people who understand it best. This creates a lose-lose situation where either 1. You maintain data purity but sacrifice domain expertise, standardized data that nobody fully understands. 2. You preserve domain expertise but lose standardization, siloed data that can't be integrated. This is why approximately 70% of data warehouse projects fail to meet business objectives. It's why 80% of data lake initiatives don't deliver their expected ROI. And it's why, despite decades of integration efforts, most organizations still struggle with the fundamental problem of making data accessible across boundaries. Let's look at what happens in practice. A marketing analyst needs customer purchase history from the sales system to segment customers for a new campaign. Under the centralized approach, this requires 1. Submitting a request to the central data team, 2. Waiting for prioritization in their backlog, 3. Explaining requirements to people who don't understand marketing needs, 4. Reviewing results that often don't match what was actually needed, 5. Repeating the cycle until the data is usable. What should take hours stretches into weeks or months. Meanwhile, the business opportunity window closes. The analyst either abandons the project or creates yet another spreadsheet with manually collected data, adding to the very data fragmentation the centralized system was supposed to solve. Even more concerning is what happens to innovation in centralized models. When data access becomes a bureaucratic process, experimentation suffers. Teams stop asking questions they know will be too difficult to answer. They limit analyses to readily available data rather than what would be most valuable. The organization optimizes for what's already known rather than discovering new insights. The technical debt also compounds over time. Each new system connected to the central hub increases complexity exponentially. Maintenance costs balloon as teams struggle to keep transformation processes working when source systems change. What started as a solution becomes the organization's heaviest technology burden. What makes this cycle particularly tragic is how predictable it is. Organizations continue investing in the same failed approaches, despite clear evidence they don't work. It's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing repeatedly while expecting different results. The fundamental problem requires reconsidering our assumptions. What if, instead of fighting against organizational structure, we designed data systems that work with it? What if we acknowledge that specialization is valuable and build systems that preserve domain expertise while enabling controlled sharing? Think of it this way. In our escape room, what if instead of tearing down walls or building elaborate tunnels, we simply installed standardized doors between chambers? Each room would maintain its purpose and furniture arrangement, but people could easily move between spaces when needed. The master key: understanding federated data governance. Those standardized doors represent a revolutionary approach called federated data governance, where the master key isn't held by a central authority, but distributed throughout the organization. What makes this approach so counterintuitive is that it creates more control by seemingly giving up control. This architectural approach preserves what makes each department valuable, their specialized knowledge, workflows, and systems, while enabling data to flow where it's needed. In our escape room analogy, the marketing team's room still contains their customer insights, furniture, the finance department maintains their specialized reporting tools, and the data science team keeps their advanced modeling workbenches. But now, standardized doorways allow authorized movement between rooms. Federated data governance rejects the binary choice between complete centralization and disconnected silos. Instead, it creates a third path: a network of connected but autonomous domains. Each business unit maintains authority over their data while adhering to shared standards that make collaboration possible. This is fundamentally different from traditional approaches that try to force all data into a single repository or format. The power of this approach lies in its recognition of how organizations naturally function. Companies don't operate as monolithic entities. They're ecosystems of specialized teams with distinct responsibilities and expertise. Federated governance works with this reality rather than against it. The finance team still speaks their specialized language of debits and credits, while the customer service department maintains their unique understanding of support tickets and resolution metrics. The key difference is that now these specialized languages can be translated when cross-domain collaboration is necessary. Consider how this plays out in daily operations. When a data scientist needs to understand customer churn patterns, they don't need to submit a request to a central data authority and wait weeks for approval. Instead, they access the customer data through standardized interfaces that the customer team has established. The customer team remains the authority on their domain, but they've created clear pathways for others to access what they need. This fundamentally shifts the governance paradigm from gatekeeping to enablement. In centralized models, a small team of data custodians controls all access. They're the single locksmith who must handle every key request for every door. This creates inevitable bottlenecks as the organization grows. In contrast, federated governance distributes this responsibility, teaching teams to create and manage standardized access points to their own domains. The standardization is crucial here. Without common protocols, we'd simply have chaos, hundreds of incompatible doors that require different keys and opening mechanisms. Effective federated governance establishes framework standards, common data definitions, shared quality metrics, compatible technologies, and aligned security protocols. Within these guardrails, domains maintain significant autonomy over implementation details. This balance creates a remarkable benefit: the ability to move quickly and safely simultaneously. Traditionally, organizations have seen these as opposing forces. You could have agility or governance, but rarely both. Federated approaches break this trade-off by pushing governance decisions closer to domain experts who understand both the data and its business context. A real-world example illuminates this power. Prima, a European insurance company, implemented federated governance as part of their data mesh initiative. They allowed individual business domains to maintain control of their data while establishing shared standards for how that data could be accessed by others. The results were impressive. They doubled their customer base while simultaneously increasing their ability to ensure regulatory compliance. By distributing responsibility while maintaining standards, they achieved what seemed impossible: greater control and greater agility simultaneously. The Prima example highlights another key advantage: scalability. Centralized governance models struggle as organizations grow because they create bottlenecks. Each new data request, access need, or quality issue must funnel through the same small team. Federated approaches distribute this workload across the organization, allowing governance to scale with the enterprise. As new business units or product lines emerge, they adopt the governance framework rather than overwhelming a central team. Implementing federated governance requires significant cultural shifts. Many organizations have spent decades reinforcing the notion that tight central control equals good governance. Shifting to distributed responsibility can trigger concerns about chaos, inconsistency, or compliance risks. Success requires reframing governance from restriction to enablement, from walls to doors. This mindset shift manifests in how data quality is approached. In traditional models, quality is enforced through inspections and checkpoints. In federated models, quality becomes a product feature, with data producers taking pride in delivering reliable, well-documented assets to their consumers. Just as product teams are motivated to please their customers, data domain teams become motivated to serve their data consumers effectively. The technology implications are equally significant. Instead of massive centralized platforms, federated approaches leverage distributed architectures with standardized interfaces. Data catalogs become critical navigation tools, allowing users to discover what data exists across domains. API gateways provide standardized access methods, and domain-specific data platforms enable teams to implement specialized capabilities while maintaining enterprise connectivity. Security actually improves under this model, contrary to initial concerns. Instead of the binary all access or no access paradigm of many centralized systems, federated governance enables nuanced, purpose-specific access controls. Data owners can expose precisely what's needed for specific use cases without unnecessarily broad permissions. This granularity reduces risk while improving usability. Operational efficiency gains emerge from this approach as well. When data requests no longer need to route through central bottlenecks, fulfillment times drop dramatically. One financial institution implementing federated governance saw their average data fulfillment time decrease from 24 days to 3 days. This acceleration creates cascading benefits as analytics projects complete faster, business decisions happen sooner, and market opportunities can be seized more quickly. Perhaps most importantly, federated governance reconnects data with domain expertise. In centralized models, data often becomes disconnected from those who understand its business context. This separation leads to misinterpretation and missed insights. When marketing data remains connected to marketing experts while becoming accessible to others, both the specialized knowledge and broader value are preserved. Cross-functional innovation flourishes in these environments. When a customer service analyst can easily combine their support ticket data with product usage patterns from the engineering team, novel insights emerge. These cross-domain discoveries often represent the highest value analytical opportunities, the patterns that individual teams cannot see when looking only at their own data. The guides, data stewards in the federated model. As teams venture beyond their familiar data territories, they encounter an uncomfortable truth. Standardized doors alone aren't enough. Without expert guides who understand both local context and global connections, most cross-domain journeys end in confusion rather than insight. These expert guides are data stewards, but not the traditional kind you might be familiar with. In conventional data management, stewards often function as gatekeepers concentrated in IT departments and focused primarily on control and compliance. They're the guards who ensure data stays properly locked away, often creating bottlenecks as they meticulously review every access request. In the federated model, data stewards transform into something entirely different. They become navigators who help teams chart courses through complex data landscapes. Like guides in our escape room metaphor, they know which doors lead where, understand the puzzles in each chamber, and help teams find the fastest path to insight. What makes this role different is how stewards are positioned within the organization. Rather than clustering in a central IT function, they're embedded directly within business domains. The marketing department has its own data stewards who deeply understand both marketing operations and data management principles. The same goes for finance, product development, customer service, and other domains. This embedded approach solves a fundamental problem that has plagued traditional data governance, the disconnect between technical management and business context. A data steward in the finance domain doesn't just understand data models and quality rules. They understand how financial data flows through business processes, what regulatory requirements impact it, and which metrics matter most to financial decision makers. Picture our escape room again. Each chamber has its own resident guide who knows every corner of that room intimately. They understand not just what data assets exist, but why they exist, how they're used, and what makes them valuable to that domain. When someone from another domain needs to access their information, these guides don't just unlock doors. They provide the context necessary to understand what's on the other side. At Chick-fil-A, this model has transformed how they manage restaurant performance data. Rather than centralizing all data stewardship in their corporate IT department, they identified super users within different business functions. These embedded stewards receive specialized training in data management principles while maintaining their deep domain expertise. The restaurant operations team has stewards who understand both operational metrics and data governance requirements, allowing them to create appropriate access controls that balance security with usability. This distributed approach creates an interesting challenge. How do you maintain consistency when stewardship is spread across different domains? Without careful coordination, you might end up with conflicting standards, incompatible definitions, or misaligned practices that defeat the purpose of federated governance. The solution isn't reverting to centralized control, but creating communities of practice where stewards from different domains regularly collaborate. These communities establish shared standards, resolve conflicts, and share knowledge across domain boundaries. They function like regular meetings of all the escape room guides, ensuring everyone understands how the rooms connect and agreeing on consistent signage and pathways. Technology company Atlassian implemented this approach by establishing a cross-functional data stewardship community that meets biweekly. Stewards from marketing, product, finance, and engineering domains come together to align on standards, while maintaining their embedded positions within their respective teams. This balance of local autonomy with cross-domain alignment has reduced their time to insight by approximately 40% while maintaining consistency across their data landscape. The steward's role becomes particularly crucial during cross-domain analysis projects. When a product manager needs to combine customer support data with usage analytics to improve feature development, the stewards from each domain collaborate to facilitate this journey. They don't just provide access, they translate domain-specific terminology, explain data limitations, and ensure insights are interpreted correctly within each context. Data stewards in this model serve dual roles that might initially seem contradictory. They advocate for their domain's specific needs, ensuring that governance rules don't impede legitimate business operations. Simultaneously, they champion enterprise-wide standards within their domain, helping team members understand why certain practices matter for the broader organization. This balancing act makes them the crucial connective tissue in federated governance. They represent their domain's perspective in governance discussions, while also bringing governance principles back to their teams. Like diplomatic attachés, they facilitate communication between specialized domains and the broader organization. The practical implementation of this model varies based on organizational size and complexity. In smaller companies, individuals might serve as part-time data stewards alongside their primary roles. Larger enterprises typically create dedicated positions with clear career paths, recognizing the strategic importance of this function. What remains consistent across implementations is the focus on embedding stewardship within domains rather than centralizing it. This proximity to business operations transforms governance from an administrative burden into a value-creating function. Stewards help teams work faster and more effectively by removing data obstacles while ensuring appropriate guardrails remain in place. The training requirements for these evolved stewards extend beyond traditional data management skills. They need communication abilities to translate technical concepts for business audiences and business concepts for technical teams. They require negotiation skills to balance competing priorities across domains. And they need enough technical knowledge to understand data architectures without necessarily being technical specialists. The insurance company Allianz developed a specialized training program for their domain-embedded data stewards that combines technical data management concepts with business communication and facilitation skills. This hybrid skill set enables their stewards to serve as effective bridges between technical and business concerns, reducing misalignment and accelerating project delivery. Domain-embedded stewards also play a crucial role in data quality management. Rather than relying on centralized quality checks divorced from business context, they implement quality processes that reflect domain-specific requirements. Financial data stewards implement controls reflecting accounting standards, while marketing stewards focus on customer data completeness and accuracy. This contextualized approach to quality ensures that standards reflect actual business needs rather than generic rules. The effectiveness of these stewards ultimately depends on organizational culture and leadership support. When executives recognize data stewards as strategic enablers rather than administrative overhead, they receive the authority and resources necessary to succeed. Companies that treat stewardship as a critical capability outperform those that view it as merely a compliance function. The agreements. Data contracts as standardized pathways. Leadership support transforms data stewards from compliance enforcers to strategic enablers. But these guides still need reliable paths to travel. Have you ever wondered why even well-intentioned data sharing between departments so often results in confusion and misinterpretation? The missing piece isn't technological, it's contractual. When data moves between domains without clear agreements, it's like passing messages through a game of telephone. Each transfer loses context and meaning. A recent Gartner study found that 87% of organizations experience significant data interpretation issues when information crosses departmental boundaries. The problem isn't access, it's understanding. Data contracts solve this fundamental challenge by establishing formal agreements between producers and consumers. Think of them as service-level agreements for data exchange. They specify exactly what data will be shared, in what format, at what quality level, and with what access permissions. Unlike traditional data dictionaries that simply define terms, data contracts create executable expectations for both parties. In our escape room metaphor, data contracts function as standardized doorways between chambers. Each doorway has clear signage indicating what passes through, who can use it, and what to expect on the other side. Without these standardized passages, our escape room participants might find unlocked doors, but have no idea what they'll encounter when crossing thresholds. The power of data contracts becomes evident when examining their practical impact. Netflix revolutionized their analytics capabilities by implementing an internal data contract system between teams. Their data access layer establishes clear expectations between data producers and consumers, ensuring that when marketing needs customer viewing data from the streaming platform team, both sides understand exactly what will be delivered and how it can be used. What makes data contracts particularly effective is how they shift thinking from passive data storage to active data products. This product mindset transforms how teams approach their information assets. When the sales department knows their customer acquisition data will be consumed by 5 other teams through clearly defined contracts, they begin to think of themselves as product managers rather than mere data collectors. Salesforce experienced this transformation firsthand when implementing data contracts between their cloud product divisions. By treating each data domain as a product with clear interfaces, they reduced cross-team integration issues by 62% while accelerating new analytics capabilities. The key insight was recognizing that data contracts create accountability on both sides of the exchange. The structure of effective data contracts follows a consistent pattern while allowing for domain-specific customization. At minimum, they typically include 1. Data schema definitions that specify the exact format and structure. 2. Quality expectations that establish accuracy, completeness, and timeliness requirements. 3. Access methods that detail how consumers retrieve the data. 4. Update frequencies that set expectations for refreshes. 5. Usage limitations that clarify permitted purposes. 6. Support protocols that define how issues are addressed. Implementing data contracts doesn't require rebuilding entire systems. Organizations typically start with their most critical data flows. When Capital One began their contract initiative, they identified the 20 most important cross-domain data exchanges and prioritized those for formalization. Rather than attempting a company-wide implementation, they established contracts for customer identification data, shared between fraud detection and customer service, creating immediate value while building momentum. The process of establishing these contracts reveals underlying assumptions that often go unexamined. When the marketing team at Enterprise Rent-A-Car drafted their first data contract for sharing campaign performance data with finance, they discovered that the 2 departments had been using completely different definitions of qualified lead for years. This discovery alone justified the contract effort, preventing countless future misalignments. Data contracts also address the thorny issue of governance without creating burdensome bureaucracy. Rather than imposing control from above, contracts distribute responsibility to those closest to the data. When Airbnb implemented data contracts between their host services and pricing algorithms teams, they documented expected data quality metrics that each domain committed to maintaining. This created mutual accountability without centralized enforcement. The technical implementation of data contracts varies by organization, but successful approaches share common elements. Many companies use API specifications like OpenAPI or JSON schema to formalize the technical aspects while capturing business definitions and quality expectations in collaborative workspaces. Tools like dbt contracts, Confluent Schema Registry, and Amundsen are gaining popularity for managing these agreements at scale. What makes data contracts particularly valuable is how they balance standardization with domain autonomy. Each team maintains control over their data while agreeing to specific interfaces for sharing. This preserves specialized knowledge while enabling cross-functional collaboration. When RBC Capital Markets implemented data contracts between their trading desks and risk management functions, they maintained domain-specific implementations while standardizing how information flowed between areas. The cultural impact of data contracts often exceeds their technical benefits. They create shared vocabulary and expectations that transform data conversations. When a marketing analyst at Target queries customer demographic data governed by a contract with the loyalty program team, both sides understand exactly what each field represents, how recent the information is, and what levels of aggregation are available. This shared understanding eliminates countless hours of clarification and rework. For organizations just beginning with data contracts, starting small delivers immediate benefits. Focus on establishing contracts for your most valuable and frequently shared data sets. Document existing data exchanges before attempting to optimize them. Involve both technical and business stakeholders in contract creation to ensure all perspectives are represented. And remember that contracts should evolve as business needs change. They're living agreements, not static documents. The payoff becomes evident quickly. Organizations with mature data contract practices report 73% faster time to insight for cross-domain analytics and 47% reduction in data quality incidents. Beyond these metrics, they describe a fundamental shift in how teams collaborate around information. Data exchanges transform from frustrating negotiations to predictable, efficient transactions. Returning to our escape room, data contracts turn chaotic shouting through walls into orderly conversations through well-designed doorways. The marketing analyst no longer needs to plead with operations for customer data. They simply access it through the established contract, understanding exactly what they'll receive and how they can use it. Meanwhile, operations maintains control over their domain while providing reliable service to their internal customers. The map, metadata management in a distributed landscape. Data contracts create structured doorways between domains, but even the most well-designed doorways are useless if you can't find them in the first place. In our escape room analogy, participants with contracts but no map would still be wandering aimlessly, hoping to stumble upon the exact data they need. According to research by Forrester, data professionals spend nearly 40% of their time simply searching for and validating data. Imagine playing our escape room blindfolded, tapping walls to find those elusive doorways. This is where metadata management becomes the essential navigation system for our federated data landscape. At its core, metadata is simply data about data, information that describes what data sets exist, where they're located, who owns them, what they mean, and how they relate to other information assets. In our escape room, metadata is the comprehensive map that shows not only each room and doorway, but also what treasures each room contains and how to access them. Traditional centralized metadata approaches often fall victim to the same problems as centralized governance itself. These projects typically involve massive efforts to document everything in a single repository, usually managed by IT. The result? Metadata catalogs that quickly become outdated, disconnected from business context, and ultimately abandoned. In one revealing case study, a global pharmaceutical company spent 2 years building a centralized metadata repository only to find it was already obsolete before completion, with adoption rates below 15% among intended users. A federated approach to metadata management follows a fundamentally different philosophy. Instead of creating one master repository maintained by a central team, it distributes the responsibility for metadata creation and maintenance to the domains that actually understand the data. This mirrors how our escape room would work if each chamber's occupants were responsible for mapping their own space while following shared conventions about how maps should be drawn. In practice, this means each domain, whether it's marketing, finance, or operations, takes ownership of documenting their data assets while adhering to organization-wide standards for metadata structure. One prominent retail organization implemented this approach by establishing metadata champions in each business unit who documented local assets, while a central platform provided the technology to connect these distributed catalogs. However, this distributed approach introduces significant challenges. The tension lies in balancing comprehensiveness with usability. Creating a map detailed enough to be useful without becoming so complex it's unusable. As one data leader at a major telecommunications company put it, "Our first metadata initiative failed because we tried to document everything about everything. Our second succeeded because we focused on what people actually needed to know to use the data effectively." Modern metadata management technologies have evolved specifically to address these challenges in federated environments. Data catalogs have emerged as the central technology enabling this approach, platforms designed to discover, organize, and present metadata in user-friendly interfaces. These tools act as the connective tissue between technical metadata, schemas, lineage, quality metrics, and business context, definitions, owners, usage examples. Colibra, a leading data intelligence platform, helped a global insurance company reduce data discovery time by 70% by implementing a federated catalog that integrated both technical metadata and business context. Their approach involved automated scanning to capture technical details, while domain experts enriched this foundation with business context through a structured contribution process. Microsoft Purview represents another powerful example of how these technologies operate in distributed environments. The platform can automatically scan and catalog data assets across diverse sources, from on-premises SQL databases to cloud storage in Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud. What makes Purview particularly valuable in federated landscapes is its ability to establish and maintain data lineage across domain boundaries, showing how information flows between systems while preserving context. A manufacturing conglomerate implemented Purview across their operations and discovered over 2,000 previously invisible data assets being used across their organization. More importantly, they mapped how these assets connected across domain boundaries, revealing dependency chains that had never been documented. This visibility allowed them to perform impact analysis before making changes to upstream systems, preventing costly disruptions. The true power of effective metadata management comes from connecting technical attributes with business meaning. Business glossaries serve this purpose by creating standardized definitions for key business terms and linking them to their technical implementations. For instance, a financial services firm built a glossary defining customer lifetime value and mapped this definition to the specific database columns and calculation logic that produced this metric in each relevant system. What this solves is the fundamental "where is the data?" the problem. Without effective metadata management, organizations face questions like, which system has the authoritative customer email addresses? Or where can I find the latest product margin calculations? These questions can consume days or weeks as analysts hunt through systems, email colleagues, and piece together partial answers. The payoff of effective metadata management in a federated landscape is transformative. A European telecommunications provider reported that after implementing their federated catalog, the time required for analysts to find and understand relevant data dropped from an average of 3 days to just 35 minutes. This acceleration happens because metadata creates a self-service environment where data consumers can find, understand, and access information without relying on tribal knowledge or personal connections. This self-service capability is particularly valuable in large organizations where institutional knowledge tends to be siloed within specific teams or long-tenured employees. When a senior data analyst at a global consumer goods company retired after 32 years, she took with her detailed knowledge of hundreds of data sources. The company estimated it would take new team members 6 to 8 months to rediscover all these connections until they implemented a metadata catalog that captured and preserved this knowledge. For organizations just beginning their metadata journey, success often comes from starting with a focused approach rather than attempting to catalog everything at once. A major healthcare provider began by mapping just their patient journey data assets across departments, creating what they called metadata minimal viable products for their most critical data domains before expanding to less urgent areas. The adoption of AI techniques has also begun to transform metadata management. Natural language processing can now automatically scan documentation, code, and user queries to extract and suggest metadata. Some organizations are using machine learning to identify patterns in how data is used, automatically detecting relationships between datasets even when they aren't explicitly documented. However, technology alone isn't sufficient. The human element remains critical, particularly domain experts who understand the business meaning of data. As one data executive noted, our catalog technology was excellent, but adoption only took off when we incentivized domain experts to contribute their knowledge and recognized them for their contributions. The Strategic Oversight, Data Governance Council. While domain experts provide essential knowledge, who orchestrates this complex ecosystem of people, processes, and technology across the organization? Behind every successful federated governance model stands a powerful but often invisible force, the Data Governance Council. This strategic body doesn't just make decisions affecting billions of dollars in data assets. It continuously balances the competing needs for standardization and domain-specific flexibility. In our escape room metaphor, the Data Governance Council serves as the master architects. They don't just design individual rooms or doorways, they conceptualize the entire layout, determining how chambers connect, establishing the building codes for doors, and ensuring the overall structural integrity of the environment. Without these architects, our escape room would either collapse into chaos or become an impenetrable fortress. A properly constituted Data Governance Council brings together representatives from across the organization, not just IT and data teams, but business stakeholders from every major domain. At multinational retailer Walmart, Their Data Governance Council includes executives from merchandising, supply chain, digital, finance, and technology. This cross-functional composition ensures decisions incorporate diverse perspectives and address real business needs rather than just technical considerations. What distinguishes a council in the federated model from traditional governance bodies is its fundamental approach to authority. Where traditional governance committees often function as gatekeepers with approval power, federated councils operate more like strategic enablers. They focus on creating the conditions for success rather than controlling every decision. As one chief data officer at a global bank explained, we shifted from asking, "Did you follow the rules?" to asking, "Do you have what you need to succeed?" The Council holds a delicate but crucial position in the governance ecosystem. They must establish enterprise-wide standards that enable interoperability while preserving the domain-specific flexibility that drives innovation. According to research from the Data Governance Institute, councils that successfully navigate this balance typically focus on three key responsibilities: strategic direction, cross-domain coordination, and measurement of outcomes. The strategic direction component involves establishing the organization's data principles, the foundational beliefs about how data should be managed. Netflix's Data Governance Council, for example, established 7 core principles, including data is a product and federated ownership with centralized support. These principles guide decisions at all levels without prescribing exactly how each domain must operate. Cross-domain coordination represents perhaps the Council's most valuable function. When the marketing department and the product team at a global consumer goods company disagreed about customer segmentation approaches, their governance council didn't dictate a solution. Instead, they facilitated a structured process that resulted in a harmonized approach that preserved each domain's unique needs while creating a shared framework for collaboration. Successful councils follow the principle of minimum viable governance, implementing just enough standardization to enable integration without stifling domain-specific innovation. At technology giant Google, their Data Governance Council established what they call interface requirements, standards for how data will be exchanged between teams, while leaving internal implementation details to the domains themselves. This approach allows teams to work in ways that suit their specific needs while ensuring their outputs can connect seamlessly with other domains. The composition of effective councils evolves as the organization's governance maturity increases. In early stages, executive sponsorship and visible leadership participation prove crucial for driving adoption. When Johnson & Johnson launched their Federated Governance Initiative, they ensured their council included C-suite executives who actively participated in meetings, sending a clear signal about organizational priorities. As governance matures, councils typically expand to include mid-level managers and practitioners who can address operational details. Healthcare provider Kaiser Permanente established a tiered governance structure with an executive council setting direction, a management council handling cross-functional coordination, and working groups addressing specific domains like clinical data, member information, and operational analytics. Meeting cadence and decision rights represent critical success factors for governance councils. Organizations with effective councils typically establish clear charters, outlining which decisions require council approval, which need consultation, and which can be made independently by domains. A major financial institution implemented a RACI framework, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, to clarify these decision rights across their data landscape. Councils must also address the thorny issue of conflict resolution, particularly when domains have competing priorities. When conflicts arise at pharmaceutical company Pfizer, their governance council uses a structured evaluation framework that weighs factors like business impact, regulatory requirements, technical feasibility, and alignment with company strategy. This systematic approach transforms potential deadlocks into data-driven decisions. Perhaps most importantly, governance councils in federated models establish accountability mechanisms that balance autonomy with responsibility. Domain teams receive authority over their data assets but must demonstrate they are meeting agreed-upon standards. Technology company Cisco implemented quarterly data quality scorecards for each domain, measuring adherence to standards while preserving implementation flexibility. The Council's role in regulatory compliance deserves special attention, particularly for organizations in highly regulated industries. Rather than dictating compliance procedures, effective councils work with domains to translate regulatory requirements into practical guidelines. A European Bank's Governance Council created compliance templates that domains could adapt to their specific workflows while ensuring core requirements were addressed. Resource allocation represents another key council responsibility. By having visibility across the entire data landscape, councils can identify opportunities for shared investments and prevent duplicative efforts. When multiple business units at a manufacturing conglomerate were planning separate data quality initiatives, their governance council coordinated a shared investment in tools and training that saved millions while improving outcomes. Organizations implementing federated governance find that council effectiveness depends heavily on communication and transparency. Decisions, standards, and the rationale behind them must be clearly communicated to all stakeholders. Some companies have created dedicated portals where domains can access governance resources, track decisions, and understand how standards evolve over time. The most effective councils recognize that governance is not a static state but an evolutionary journey. They regularly reassess their approach, measuring outcomes against business objectives rather than compliance metrics. A council at a major airline shifted their success measures from percentage of data assets cataloged to time saved in accessing trusted data, a change that better reflected the actual business value of governance. As federated governance matures, councils increasingly focus on building data governance capabilities throughout the organization rather than centralizing all governance activities. Through training programs, communities of practice, and recognition systems, they cultivate governance mindsets across domains. One technology company created a Data Governance Champion certification program that trained over 500 employees to support governance initiatives within their respective areas. The Great Escape: Federated Governance in Action. Organizations with mature federated governance don't just build better data systems. They create entirely new possibilities for collaboration that were previously unimaginable. What if your data silos weren't prisons but instead became interconnected chambers in a knowledge ecosystem where information flows precisely where it creates the most value? Let's return to our escape room scenario, but now with all the federated governance components we've explored fully implemented. Remember those frustrated professionals trapped in separate chambers, unable to access the information they needed? Their environment has transformed dramatically. In the marketing chamber, a data steward now serves as a local guide, maintaining detailed documentation of all customer engagement metrics and campaign performance data. Rather than hoarding this information, the steward has identified which elements provide value across domains and actively promotes their availability. When a data scientist from another chamber needs customer segmentation data, they no longer encounter a wall but instead find a clearly marked doorway with standardized access procedures. Each domain-specific chamber still maintains its specialized purpose and expertise. The finance team continues using their specialized tools and methodologies, but they've worked with their embedded data steward to document their most valuable data products. The critical difference: now there are standardized pathways between chambers. Data contracts that specify exactly what information flows between domains, in what format, and under what conditions. Consider what happens when the product development team needs to understand customer sentiment across multiple touchpoints. In the old siloed environment, this would require weeks of emails, meetings, and manual data extractions. Now, the team consults the metadata management system, their map of the data landscape, which shows them exactly where sentiment data exists across marketing, customer service, and sales domains. The data contracts provide standardized access methods for each source, complete with quality metrics and usage guidelines. Yet even with these new capabilities, the transition isn't without challenges. Teams accustomed to working in isolation must learn new patterns of collaboration. A product manager might discover that sales data is available but struggle to interpret the specialized terminology used by the sales team. Marketing analysts might technically have access to manufacturing quality metrics but lack the context to use them appropriately. This is where the Governance Council's strategic oversight becomes crucial. When the product manager encounters confusion about sales metrics, the Council doesn't simply provide a definition, they facilitate knowledge sharing between domains. They might arrange cross-training sessions, where sales experts explain key concepts to product teams, or develop supplementary documentation that translates domain-specific language into organization-wide terminology. The Governance Council also continuously adapts the federated model as requirements evolve. When the organization decides to expand into a new market segment, the Council doesn't dictate how each domain should adjust their data. Instead, they coordinate cross-domain planning sessions to identify what new information needs to flow between chambers and establish standards for those new pathways. One pharmaceutical company implemented this approach when launching a new therapy. Rather than creating a massive centralized database, they established data contracts between research, manufacturing, regulatory compliance, and marketing teams. Each domain maintained ownership of their specialized data while agreeing on standardized ways to share critical information. The result? Their time to market decreased by 37% compared to previous launches where data integration was handled through traditional centralized approaches. As these components work together, the transformation becomes tangible in everyday operations. A business analyst who previously waited 3 weeks for data access now self-serves through documented pathways, often gaining insights within hours. Cross-domain reporting that required monthly manual reconciliation now updates automatically through established data contracts with quality metrics visible to all consumers. At a global telecommunications provider, this transformation manifested when they needed to analyze customer churn patterns across their product lines. Previously, combining network performance data, billing information, and customer service interactions required weeks of manual extraction and reconciliation. After implementing federated governance, analysts could access standardized data products from each domain through a self-service catalog, reducing analysis time from weeks to days while improving accuracy. Perhaps most importantly, the federated approach enables innovation that was previously impossible. When data from different domains can be readily combined while maintaining its context and quality, entirely new insights emerge. A retail organization discovered unexpected correlations between in-store lighting configurations and customer purchase patterns only after their store operations and marketing analytics teams could seamlessly share data through federated governance. What makes this approach sustainable is that it doesn't force artificial centralization or standardization. Each chamber in our escape room retains its unique purpose and specialized tools. The finance team continues using accounting terminology that makes sense for their function. The customer service team maintains their specialized systems for tracking support tickets. But now, information can flow between these chambers through well-documented, standardized pathways. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development implemented this approach for their development impact data. Rather than forcing all project teams to use identical tools and methods, they established data contracts that standardized how impact measurements were shared while allowing teams to maintain domain-specific practices. This balanced approach improved cross-project analysis while respecting the unique requirements of different development contexts. In our escape room analogy, the team hasn't escaped by demolishing the room. They've transformed it into an interconnected environment where information flows to where it creates value. The walls between chambers now feature standardized doorways with clear rules for passage. Guides in each chamber help visitors navigate unfamiliar territory. A comprehensive map shows everyone the full landscape of available information, and a governance council ensures this ecosystem continues to evolve as needs change. A global manufacturer demonstrated this transformation when connecting their product quality data across design, manufacturing, and customer service domains. Rather than forcing all teams to adopt identical systems, they implemented federated governance with domain-specific data stewards, standardized data contracts, and a unified metadata catalog. The results were remarkable. Quality issues identified 58% faster, cross-functional innovation increased by 32%, and customer satisfaction metrics improved by 24%. The beauty of this approach is that it respects the natural structure of organizations while enabling the fluid information flow needed in today's business environment. Domain expertise remains preserved and specialized systems continue serving their purpose, but information no longer gets trapped where it was created. Your escape plan: practical steps to implement federated governance. Let's enhance it with a practical implementation roadmap. The vision of connected data domains is compelling. But the fundamental question remains, how do you transform your organization from isolated silos to a collaborative ecosystem without disrupting critical business operations? The journey to federated governance isn't about revolutionary change. It's about evolutionary transformation that acknowledges your current reality while methodically building toward a more connected future. Most organizations fail in this transformation not because of technological limitations, but because they attempt too much change simultaneously. According to McKinsey's research on data transformation initiatives, 67% of organizations that successfully implemented federated governance did so through phased approaches rather than comprehensive overhauls. The most successful organizations recognize that governance transformation requires patience, persistence, and a willingness to start small. Your escape plan begins with a clear-eyed assessment of your current state. Before dismantling any walls, you need to understand exactly what silos exist and why they formed in the first place. This assessment should identify not just technical integration points, but also cultural barriers, competing incentives, and political challenges that maintain separation. IBM's Data Governance Council recommends creating a governance readiness assessment that evaluates domains across 5 dimensions: data quality maturity, cross-functional collaboration history, leadership support, technical capabilities, and regulatory requirements. With this assessment complete, the next critical step is selecting your pilot domains. Not all data domains are created equal when it comes to governance transformation. The ideal pilot candidates share 3 characteristics: high-value business outcomes from integration, supportive leadership willing to champion new approaches, and manageable technical complexity. Deloitte's governance practice found that organizations starting with finance and customer domains achieved 40% faster time to value than those beginning with more specialized operational domains. ExxonMobil's federated governance journey offers an instructive case study. Rather than attempting to transform their entire global data landscape, they began with a focused pilot connecting their downstream marketing data with retail operations in a single geographic region. This limited scope allowed them to demonstrate value quickly while developing reusable governance patterns before expanding to other domains. Once you've selected your pilot domains, the focus shifts to establishing minimum viable governance. This means creating just enough standardization to enable effective collaboration without imposing bureaucratic overhead. Start by defining critical data elements that must be standardized across domains, typically customer identifiers, product codes, and transaction references. According to Gartner's research, organizations that limit their initial governance scope to fewer than 30 critical data elements achieve success rates 3 times higher than those attempting comprehensive standardization. The sequence for building essential components matters tremendously. Many organizations falter by starting with complex technical implementations rather than focusing on roles and responsibilities. The most successful sequence follows a clear pattern. First, establish data stewardship roles within domains, then develop basic data contracts between those domains, and only then implement supporting metadata management and technical infrastructure. Wells Fargo exemplifies this approach in their governance transformation. They began by identifying and training domain data stewards even before defining technical standards. These stewards first mapped informal relationships between domains, documenting how data actually flowed rather than how it theoretically should flow. This ground truth assessment informed their subsequent data contract development, ensuring standards reflected operational reality rather than idealized designs. When establishing these foundational components, focus on solving specific business problems rather than abstract governance principles. Data contracts should address actual pain points in cross-domain collaboration, and data stewards should demonstrate tangible value by resolving specific data quality issues. At target, each domain steward must demonstrate quarterly cost savings or revenue improvements resulting from improved data governance, keeping the focus on business outcomes rather than governance processes. Throughout implementation, measuring progress becomes essential for maintaining momentum and securing continued support. Traditional governance metrics focusing on compliance or documentation volume prove far less effective than outcome-oriented measures. The most compelling metrics demonstrate business impact, reduced time to integrate data across domains, increased reuse of existing data assets, improved decision-making speed, and reduced rework from data quality issues. Procter & Gamble developed a particularly effective metric they call time to trusted insight, measuring how quickly teams can access, understand, and apply data from other domains to business decisions. They reported a 62% improvement in this metric 18 months into their federated governance implementation, providing compelling evidence of business value. The implementation journey inevitably encounters significant challenges that must be proactively addressed. Resistance to change represents the most common obstacle, particularly from domains accustomed to complete autonomy. Harvard Business Review's research on data transformations found that organizations explicitly addressing cultural resistance through education programs and early wins were twice as likely to succeed as those focusing exclusively on technical implementation. Skill gaps present another significant challenge. Federated governance requires domain experts to develop new data management capabilities and governance professionals to understand business domain specifics. Organizations like Thomson Reuters address this through data ambassador programs that pair technical data professionals with domain experts for mutual skill development. Competing priorities continually threaten governance initiatives, particularly when immediate operational needs conflict with longer-term governance improvements. Successful organizations protect governance resources by connecting initiatives directly to high-priority business outcomes. American Express ties their domain governance funding directly to customer experience improvements, ensuring governance priorities remain aligned with business imperatives. Technical implementation challenges also abound, particularly in integrating disparate systems. Rather than attempting complete technical standardization, successful organizations focus on creating standardized interfaces between systems while allowing domains to maintain their specialized implementations. The healthcare provider Kaiser Permanente developed a federated approach they call Connect, Don't Collect, focusing on standardized APIs between systems rather than data centralization. The payoff from this phased, practical approach comes in both immediate value and long-term transformation. By focusing on specific business problems within limited domains, organizations deliver tangible benefits while building the patterns and capabilities for broader transformation. Organizations following this approach typically see initial value within 90 days while building momentum for more comprehensive changes. The future room, generative AI and federated governance. While building momentum for transformation is critical, there's a technological tsunami approaching that will fundamentally reshape our data landscape. Generative AI isn't just another tool in the data governance toolkit, it's potentially rebuilding the entire workshop while simultaneously creating powerful new tools we haven't yet imagined. Let's revisit our escape room analogy one more time. Until now, we've been discussing how to create doorways between existing rooms, standardize locks, and map out connections. But generative AI introduces something far more radical. Imagine if the escape room itself could suddenly reconfigure on demand, creating new chambers, passageways, and even generating new data artifacts within those spaces. This isn't science fiction. Organizations implementing generative AI are already witnessing this transformation. Take OpenAI's deployment of ChatGPT within enterprise environments. What began as a natural language interface has quickly evolved into systems that can synthesize, transform, and even create data products based on existing organizational knowledge. The walls of our data silos aren't just becoming permeable, they're becoming programmable. The impact on federated governance is profound. Traditional governance focused on managing existing data assets, cataloging them, securing them, ensuring quality. But generative AI creates net new data products dynamically. A financial institution implementing GPT-4 discovered their model could generate synthetic customer profiles for testing that were statistically representative without exposing actual customer data, creating an entirely new room of test data that didn't previously exist. This amplifies the value of federated governance in three critical ways. First, domain expertise becomes even more crucial when evaluating AI-generated outputs. When a large manufacturing company implemented generative AI to draft product specifications, they found that only domain experts could effectively validate whether the outputs were technically feasible and aligned with safety requirements. The federated model, with its emphasis on domain ownership, provides the perfect framework for this validation. Second, data contracts become even more essential. when managing AI-generated content. Anthropic, the creator of Claude AI, has implemented what they call constitutional AI, essentially a contract-based approach where the AI system must adhere to specific principles. This parallels how data contracts work in federated governance, creating clear boundaries and expectations for how data, or in this case AI outputs, can be used. Third, metadata management evolves from static documentation to dynamic context provision. As one healthcare organization discovered, their AI assistant could only provide trustworthy clinical summaries when it had access to rich metadata about medical terminologies, regulatory constraints, and relationships between conditions. The federated catalog they had built became the essential foundation for responsible AI implementation. Let's visualize this in our escape room. Generative AI acts like a master builder who can instantly construct new chambers or reconfigure existing ones based on specific needs. An analyst needing to understand customer sentiment no longer navigates through existing rooms. Instead, AI creates a temporary workspace that pulls relevant data from multiple domains, generates insights, and visualizes trends, all while adhering to the established governance framework. However, this power introduces new governance challenges. Many organizations have discovered that generative AI can amplify existing data quality issues or create convincing but incorrect information when trained on flawed data. A global bank implementing an AI assistant for investment recommendations found that without proper governance, the system occasionally generated plausible-sounding but factually incorrect market analyses based on outdated or inconsistent training data. This is where the tension in our story reaches its peak. The very technology that promises to break down data silos could potentially create new forms of misinformation and compliance risks if not properly governed. The stakes become even higher as these systems make consequential recommendations that impact business decisions, customer experiences, and potentially even safety-critical operations. Leading organizations are addressing this tension by extending federated governance principles to AI systems. Microsoft's approach with Copilot integration in Power BI demonstrates this evolution. Rather than building a separate governance framework for AI, they've extended their existing data governance capabilities to encompass AI outputs. Business domains maintain ownership of their data products, but now those products include AI-generated visualizations, insights, and recommendations. This represents a crucial pattern. Effective AI governance builds upon federated data governance rather than replacing it. At healthcare provider Kaiser Permanente, AI ethics committees include representation from clinical domains, ensuring that domain expertise informs AI implementation. Similarly, financial services firm Morgan Stanley implemented a federated approach to their AI assistant, requiring that each business domain establish specific guardrails for how generative models interact with their proprietary content. The practical implementation of AI governance within a federated model focuses on three key areas. First, input quality becomes paramount. Organizations like Salesforce have implemented certification processes for data sets used in AI training, requiring domain owners to verify accuracy, completeness, and representation before data can be used to train generative models. This distributes responsibility for AI quality to those who understand the data best. Second, transparency mechanisms become essential. When JP Chase implemented generative AI for investment research, they required the system to provide explicit citations and confidence levels for all generated content. This allows domain experts to quickly validate outputs against source materials, ensuring accountability across the federated landscape. Third, governance extends to model deployment and monitoring. Netflix's implementation of generative capabilities within their recommendation system includes domain-specific oversight of model performance. Content teams, regional specialists, and technical groups each monitor different aspects of the system's performance, creating a federated approach to AI operations. Perhaps most importantly, federated governance provides the ideal framework for ensuring that AI implementation remains human-centered. By distributing oversight to domain experts rather than centralizing it within technical teams, organizations ensure that AI serves human needs rather than the reverse. As one technology executive noted, our domain teams don't just validate what the AI produces, they define what it should produce in the first place. The payoff from this approach is substantial. Organizations that extend federated governance to encompass AI report 42% faster implementation of generative capabilities while maintaining higher standards of quality and compliance. They avoid the black box problem that plagues many AI implementations, where outputs cannot be verified or traced to source materials. Instead, they create transparent, trustworthy systems that amplify human expertise rather than replacing it. This represents the ultimate evolution of our escape room, from isolated chambers to interconnected spaces, and finally to a dynamically reconfigurable environment that responds to specific needs while maintaining necessary boundaries. The walls don't disappear, but they become permeable, movable, and intelligent. Throughout this journey, we've seen how the data silo escape room represents the real challenge organizations face today. Federated data governance isn't about eliminating specialization. It's about creating intentional connections while preserving domain expertise. The future belongs not to those who accumulate the most data, but to those who enable it to flow freely to where it generates maximum value. Organizations implementing this approach consistently report dramatic improvements in innovation, decision speed, and competitive advantage. Your own escape starts with a single step. Choose one critical domain. Identify potential stewards and draft your first data contract. The transformation won't happen overnight, but each small victory builds momentum toward data agility that drives lasting success.